Let's move on now. We've got another presentation from another person with Aniridia, and I'd like to welcome Emily and Nash to talk about train station maps for visually impaired people.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk now for the next 10 minutes just about the work that I'm doing currently as a PhD student at Coventry University um, as a uh, research kind of supported by the Motability Foundation and Coventry University, looking at accessibility on our public transport and in particular on rail travel. So the picture here is just of Paddington Station. So there's a lovely little picture of Paddington just on platform one there. So just the overview of my presentation. I'll give a bit of an introduction to myself. I will just talk about my PhD focus and a bit of a whistle-stop tour of just some of my results. I'll then just talk just a bit wider, just kind of what's happening really in terms of um, accessibility on public transport, because it's definitely a topic that is certainly being, sort of highlighted and discussed in Westminster. So we'll just touch on that, and then yeah, kind of where I hope things will be going really. Just a bit of an introduction to myself. I know I definitely know some people on this call, but for anyone who doesn't know me, I do have Aniridia. I also have two children who are in this picture as well. So who are 8 and 11, who also have Aniridia. And I also have my Golden Labrador guide dog, Kelly, who's just sitting in between us, just on a train. So I think kind of my interest really in the area of transport really has just stemmed from all of us really just having that reliance, and we kind of know it's that connecting bit really to allow us to, you know, whether it get to healthcare, school, education, or social events, really, that us being able to use public transport is a real must, really. But really, people's experiences so far are just kind of sort of quite varied, really, in terms of positive and negative experiences. So, in terms of what I'm doing, so I am just coming to the end of my third year now as a postgraduate researcher. As I explained, uh, the support for the PhD has come from Motability Foundation, who's doing quite a bit of work in this space, looking at accessibility for the wide variety of disabled people, and again, at all types of transport. So everything from the walking and the cycling. All the way through to our more kind of structured networks of buses and trains. What I was really kind of sort of hoping to do, I think, kind of sort of is two things really, is just trying to establish the current experiences, and that's kind of sort of throughout the UK. So there's been some smaller kind of sort of projects done either in kind of like London or Scotland, but really understanding you know common experiences, kind of in the current world, really, particularly kind of sort of post COVID, as our transport systems are just becoming busier and more stretched. Um, and then looking really at how we can support people with visual impairment to just be more independent in their travel. So I know there are things like passenger assist, but I think there's a real desire for people to um, be doing as much as they can themselves, which then gives them the flexibility really to travel as and when we want, rather than relying on a booked service that, as we kind of sort of know, can have challenges as well in terms of its reliability. So I've completed two interview studies, one with people with a visual impairment across kind of a variety of ages and locations and types of sight loss. So they interviewed 29 participants 18 months ago now. Following that, I then spoke to professionals working in the area, so people working in charities or social services, or in the rail operators, to really kind of sort of understand, how individuals with sight loss are just being supported within the public transport area, really, and making journeys independently. And I've just come to the end of a usability study now, just looking at different types of station maps and information. and how people with visual impairment use those and how they may actually assist us in travel and when we're arriving at stations, and particularly kind of those routes or those areas which are unfamiliar or changing for people. So this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the results I found. So sorry, it's a bit brief. From the interview studies, and some of these bits, kind of sort of won't come really as great surprise. There is kind of sort of a need really just to understand the spectrum of visual impairment and the different complexities that people struggle with, really. So for some people, judging that gap is the difficult bit. For other people, it's seeing the signage. For other people, it's dealing with the crowds and the busyness, really. So just understanding all the different complexities. I think, it would be nice if the simple answer was to have that consistency. And certainly there are moves to try and standardise what's being done in the rail industry. You've got the Great British Railways being created, which will hopefully begin to assist with that, because I think one of the challenges is definitely as you move across the country and you change between rail operators, they all manage and do things quite separately. And I think that's exaggerated in the support they provide disabled people. Um, and then also just really understanding what support people with visual impairments want within a transport setting. I think of all the people I spoke to, and that's kind of on both sides, that's both patients and those working with people with sight loss, real kind of sort of acknowledgement that quite often support, maybe around like white cane skills or a specific part of technology, but actually putting that together within the complex environment of station hubs and bus travel, you're quite lucky if you kind of sort of receive that kind of support, really. So it does exist, and there are some really good examples, but it's certainly not consistently being delivered to people, which is really limiting the confidence, really, and their belief in kind of independence to do that. So, as I said, the recent usability study I just looked at was looking at maps that are actually available on rail operators' websites. So, when people look for station information, they tend to go to National Rail Inquiries, where there are just 2D maps, so a little bit similar. So, there's two pictures on this slide, one on the right-hand side, which is a sort of a 2D representation of a map, and a little bit similar to what you might see on National Rail Inquiries. On the left is a much more interactive platform where you actually see the front of the station, what it looks like. You can actually walk through the station. You can see what the ticket office looks like. You can see what platforms look like. And there's also actually a guided route planner, which will just take you, if you put in there that you want to go to platform 2, it takes you through the station and the route you need to follow and where the lift is and where the stairs take you down. Unfortunately, these maps have kind of sort of been developed, but are quite often buried in train operators' websites. So people of my 28 participants, no one actually knew they existed or where to find them. But there is definitely acknowledgement, really, that having some idea of what a station could look like, of a route that might be needed within a station, would definitely be a benefit kind of before travelling and help some of that anxiety and planning and access to information. So my study kind of just looked at how easy it was to use some of these platforms, particularly with things like VoiceOver, but also what information was actually critical to kind of sort of help people. I think it's quite easy to add things, and there was certainly like another site where there was, a lot of information, a lot of visual information. It told you where all the trees were, but actually it's not really important where the trees are. You actually just want to know where the signs might be or where the barriers might be. And so it's just getting the right type of information. So just to let people know, I don't know how much people kind of sort of aware of that. Also at Coventry University, there's the National Centre for Accessible Transport, which is a group that's been set up and funded by a Motability Foundation to look at a wide variety of issues within transport. So I was lucky to kind of sort of join when this was just starting. So kind of sort of 2 years on, this is a bit of an outdated picture of us all actually at NCAP, but it's anyone with me and really. But it very much came from the research that had been done showing that experience of disabled people, that there was a big gap with disabled people making significantly less journeys than those non-disabled counterparts. And this really isn't changing. So there is definitely movement now to kind of understand um, the different challenges and the different potential solutions that could help. And as I kind of sort of said earlier, really just in the complex area and actually the complexity of the support that's required for us in order to do wayfinding and learn routes within this area. So just for anybody who's kind of not particularly familiar with the with NCAT, just to just sort of let you know some of the wider things that are happening, both in Coventry but wider really. They do currently have funding applications open in order to address some of the issues and challenges that have been identified, which is great. And that's kind of sort of like smaller projects just to be initiated and actually trialed to see if solutions can help. Um, it's a lot more kind of sort of embedded NCAT, and they're beginning to run these projects and publish their results. So they've just recently appointed a new CEO, which is just another kind of sort of step in its development really of NCAT. Some other just current things that they're looking at is the complaint handling, because quite often a lot of the feedback was it doesn't really feel as though the comments or the feedback are going anywhere. And quite often actually people don't necessarily want to complain. Actually, it's about that feedback loop and actually being part of the discussion, really being part of the table as to what could help and what would actually be a benefit to people. As I said, I think at the very beginning, really, there is discussions definitely in Westminster now, kind of around accessible transport, and Tanya Gray Thompson's been big advocate for that. And there is now an accessible transport policy committee. We've just issued a strategy document called Joined Up Policies and Joined Up Journeys, which has had a real focus really on the four nations, so Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and England, and really looking them at individuals, where they are in those journeys of, providing accessibility, accommodations and support really, and actually just providing a roadmap really for the next 5 years as to how they can do it in a collaborative way, but bring them all up to kind of sort of the same spec. And then just for anybody who's kind of not aware, the NCAT panel does exist, so it's people can get involved in research. You can sign up, and they'll just send out requests really for people to, perhaps answer online surveys or get involved in focus groups, and that's on the website on the NCAT panel. So just in a bit of summary, really, this picture on this slide is just of me and my guide dog Kelly in Westminster Hall. So I was lucky enough to go for some training at Westminster at the beginning of the year and be involved, that I could provide a submission when they were, calling for ideas kind of around joined up travel in the UK. So I was able to join up there really. So really for me, the next steps are I need to write up my PhD now. Now I've kind of actually done it. So look out for that really kind of in the next sort of 6 months. So hopefully I'll be finishing that. But it's also allowed me to get involved now in the accessibility panel of Transport for Wales and the wider kind of sort of access for all transport in Wales, which is great. I'm going to an RNIB workshop next week as well, which is looking about future travel and what that might look like. So I think, yeah, kind of sort of the summary for me really is there's quite a lot going on now in this space. And certainly kind of sort of NCAT and the NCAT panel is the place to go and find out more if you'd like to. So that's just my last slide, is just some contact details for me if you'd like to know anything more about my research, or if I can point you in the direction, have a look on the NCAT website. And I'm done.
Thank you very much, Emily. Right on time. It's
Mhm.
wonderful to hear that someone like you, with Aniridia in particular, is involved in such important work as this. One of the things that I encountered the other day, I was looking up at a digital destination board on a train platform, trying to see when the next train was coming. Unfortunately, I was therefore looking upwards, and the glass station roof was right above, and the sun happened to be there as well. So, although I could actually see the destination board, I couldn't see anything because the sun was so bright shining behind it.
So many
Yeah,
examples. But yeah, I mean, that was one thing I probably didn't really mention was to be selected, actually kind of do the PhD. We all needed to have a lived experience of a disability. And I think one of the big drivers of the research at the moment is that it's being done and being conducted with people who have the lived experience. And that's kind of sort of, yeah, quite a big shift to get us all involved. And unfortunately, and it won't really surprise people. There's obviously been quite a lot of challenges kind of around that. And I could probably do another talk really on my challenges in terms of higher education and access in higher education. But yeah, it's definitely kind of sort of a key bit really is that the users are involved, and the people with the lived experience that are involved in this research and driving really what the solutions and answers are.
yeah, totally. So thanks very much, Emily, for that.